Hi classmates, this is Adam. I am responding to a request from a few people after the last painting of the clouds. I have a small piece of paper. It is, I think, like a 7 by 10. So I'm gonna use the same brushes I would use on a bigger piece of paper though. The last one I did was, I think, 16 by 20. That's the size, those are inches, sorry. That's the size of the last paper. So I am totally rigging up my camera, so I apologize if there's shadows and everything. I'll be moving around behind them. But I don't have a better setup, so it'll be the same technique no matter how the camera looks. So I've got my 1-inch hake, and then I don't know exactly the name of this brush. Somebody can post it. I'm sure somebody does, but as you can tell, it has a nice rounded top. And it is maybe between 1/2 and 1/4 of an inch wide, maybe a little bit more than 1/4. So these are the two that I use mainly to do my clouds. Of course, wetting everything down first, like we all know to do. And thank you, Scott, for showing us that. And this is just a large, I think, a 4-inch or whatever hake to move the water around and get it damp. Just gonna put down a real rough horizon here just to give myself some kind of a perspective here and where I'm gonna lay things out. So there's just a simple horizon line. And then for the clouds that I used today, I actually went and kind of mapped them out. So I'll just roughly do that. And I don't know if anybody else does this, but I like to kind of twirl the brush in my hand to break up some of those edges. And then I actually like when I get the fur. I know that's probably making some people sick or anxious, but I actually like when I get that broken up a little bit, because it does tend to provide a little bit more regularity in the edge of my clouds. So that's why I do it. So there's a good, like, rough, just kind of general outline that I can use so you guys can see. So I'm just gonna make a little bit of a gradient. A little bit. And then sometimes I'll just mist it, and that'll help kind of smooth things out, as you know. So I'm gonna dry it. Something I forgot to do is actually make the base of the clouds. I was too concerned with setting up the camera. And typically straight line, usually have a little variation. Soften it a little, as Scott would say. Okay, and this could get a little sloppy, but trying to move things along here. I'm gonna dry one more time. This little area I get all the time, and I'll try to work that in or incorporate it or hide it. So next step, we're gonna do layers and layers and layers, right? I always mention those when I post something. So we're gonna go damp again. And once we start getting paint down, actually kind of try to pick the way I think the rain might be falling, or the way the sunlight might be hitting it. So if there are streaks, they can be used later and look more intentional. So something to keep in mind. And then we've got another layer to do here. All right, so now I've got my rounded tip brush, a little bigger than 1/4 of an inch. I like to work from the bottom and find the base of the clouds and then kind of pull up. And that way it distributes the right amount of pigment down there on the base, making that look heavier, fill with rain, however we want it to look. And then kind of work my way up, varying the brush strokes. So I get little pockets of dark like I'm getting here. Ooh, that went real dark. While still, get out there. There we go. While still keeping the majority of the weight down low. And you can kind of see it start to build there. I'm already happy with this. This is interesting. What I was doing previously was using the hake to do a lot of this work, and man, that got frustrating, you know. So I finally was like, well, go smaller. What's the rush? So that's been the change. I think I mentioned on there that, you know, I had tried something new to help with the technique, and this has been it. Using this little guy a little bit sooner and just taking a little more time to do a painting. And for that particular painting that I was using, it was just a pretty solid line of clouds, the reference photo that I used. And sometimes I'll panic when I do that and put too much pigment down, but then I realize, you know, that's going to create some good interest, honestly, and some different depth. You know, that cloud suddenly is a bit closer than the ones back here, and that's all right. That's cool. I like that. So I'm going to put a little more weight here, and then you'll see these little variations, right? Here's this. On the camera, it really pops out, but in just to the naked eye, you know, I see some of these little things that are kind of vague, and I let those, you know, okay, that's the next step. So at some point, the reference photo actually kind of gets thrown out. I can get back to it and try to mimic something that I like, but, you know, eventually, I'm literally following the paint and letting it kind of dictate what's happening. And I'm still damp. I'm not too wet down here yet. But I can start to see some of this harder edges that are coming out. So I'm gonna hit it with a little water. That may have been a little bit too much, but hey, I'm still learning this process. Always, as we all know. And then I'll get a little bit of a fade going in here shortly. I'm gonna put a nice dark cloud up here in this corner to cover up my mistake, because that's how I do it. And it'll also kind of help really define that edge. Now, suddenly, it looks intentional, in my opinion. We have another little cloud over here. Just get a little more punch there. I see a nice line kind of forming there naturally, so we're going to take advantage of that. And we're going to move this up just a little. Let that kind of become whatever it's going to be in the painting here. And as I tap like that, that's another way that I get these irregular little kind of blobs that actually I learned by accident, tends to start to look like parts of a cloud, especially those big puffy convection clouds that start climbing in the afternoons. See, we got blobs, and if it becomes too much, paper's still nice and damp, spread it out a little bit, and you really need this to drop. Cooperate. And trying to be irregular. Giving it places to fall away. Okay, now we have distant clouds, something going on here. We got some nice little details happening here. We got some nice crisp edges too, because that does happen, right? You know, we look up and we can see the fluffy ones and we can see the really defined ones. So it helps kind of bring the two things together. Now, I'm gonna dry. So the last thing I'll want to do for this one anyway is define these edges. So this is in the distance, so I'm gonna have to put a little bit more contrast in the background up against these further clouds back to make them pop up off the page a little bit. I've also deliberately, because I'm not good with putting white back, whitest white, one of my art teachers always told me, should come through as the paper, if you have white paper, of course. So that'll be your lightest light, and then you work your way down from that. So that's how I do my starbursts. I leave a spot white, and then that is going to be the brightest spot on the page by default. We'll get it damp again. All right, so now that we're damp, I'm going to go back through here. Same kind of technique. Pulling away from my clouds, right? I want these to have a little bit of definition and pop. But I also, there we go. There we go, that's nice, that's working out. But I also don't want it to bleed into the rest of the cloud, so I need it to come away. So I'm gonna do my best to encourage it to come away. And if I make a mistake, I just try to work with it, right? Like we all do. This is a little too, that's better. Throw some pigment down in there. Get a nice little change. Let's come up here, give this a little definition. And it'll be a little darker up here. Look, still kind of alternating and moving the brush and turning it like so, while I am dropping the pigment down so I can get some irregularity in there. And I can smooth out hard edges, add to, make it a little darker in some spots, right? And now I'm starting to get dry, so I gotta pay attention to make sure I don't get, you know, my damp doesn't turn dry. And I am adding just a tiny little bit of water in the bowl to try to keep it consistent. Oh, I like that, worked out. Didn't mean to, but I seldom get through a painting and be like, well, that went exactly how it was supposed to. Nah, that didn't happen for me. I want to preserve some of the glow off of that cloud, so I'm just going to come back in and smooth out that hard. Get a little bit of regularity in there. That's okay. Okay. So this is it. This is how I do it. Then it's a matter of going back through and building and building and building and building and building and adding layer on layer to then try to get more depth, get more detail sometimes, you know, create that middle ground too, somewhere in there. And then hopefully get something I'm happy with. I'll get a little bit of contrast in here. So that cloud part pops up here and then the other part drops back. So I've got one layer, I've got 2, 3, 4. And by layers, I don't mean how many times I went back and painted, but I'm thinking clouds, I'm thinking depth now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe 6 up here too. So these may be on the same field. This area may be on the same field or plane rather. And then this area back here is further back yet. So that's how I do it. I sure appreciate all the interest and all the really sweet, excellent comments that everybody leaves. And I'll keep them coming. And I sure appreciate everybody in the class and love seeing all the work. And I really love that Scott's made this an option for us. So thank you. Thank you guys. And keep them coming. I'm so impressed with what everybody's been cranking out. It's awesome. So can't wait to see what's next. Thanks guys.